So my idea is called the anti-alter ego. I'll explain what I think that is and what it is for me, and then maybe how people can apply it in their own lives. So to me, the anti-alter ego is like the opposite side of what we usually think about when it comes to alter egos in sport. There's this notion that at high level, an elite athlete might have this unrealistic extension of themselves that they kind of act out in moments when it matters, when they have to perform. It's often quite emotionally intense, right? Quite angry, quite dominant. And it's a sub-personality, one might say. A spirit that possesses them when they go and perform. Now, the best example of that people will be aware of is Kobe Bryant's idea of Black Mamba, right? That's who he was when he went on court to go and dominate. And then there was this whole philosophy that came from that, this Mamba mentality, right? And that was different to Kobe Bryant, who's the father of his children and the husband to his wife, etc., etc. He had this sub-personality that wasn't the whole of him. It was like this character that he was when he needed to go and dominate others in the sporting environment. So that's the alter ego that we usually consider in sport. But I have problems with that. And I talked about this with my sports psychologist because he suggested it to me as an idea. Joel, could you create an angry, emotionally intense version of yourself to go and be when it matters? And I went, well, I can see the utility in that. Obviously, it works. Many people at the highest level, Kobe Bryant being one of them, Tom Brady being another one in American football, these people have these personas, and it does bloody well. They get to the top of their field. But for me, it feels like quite a toxic fuel source. One that works, one that will power the engine, but I don't think it's spiritually healthy for me personally. Like the idea of me creating a narrative in my head that I want to go and dominate the other people I'm against on court, for me feels a little bit aggressive or overly aggressive. And I don't really want to play basketball in an aggressive way. I want to play basketball like it's an art form. The way I put it to my housemate in the sauna today, the way I put it to my housemate in the sauna today is that rather than being some aggressive, violent person, I want to be Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid. A very still, very peaceful man, but he knows how to fight. And you don't fuck with him. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, all that being said, this new idea then came into my brain of the anti-alter ego. And the anti-alter ego, rather than looking at this unrealistic, maybe extension of ourselves to be in the moments when it matters, when there's pressure, it's actually to look at the weakest, most vulnerable, most insecure parts of who we really are. The parts of ourselves that we don't often want to talk about or want to be in the world, and the parts of ourselves that we're not proud of. And do what you do and perform for and in honor of that weak and vulnerable part of yourself. Now that sounds weird, and let me explain it in my own context for it to make sense. So throughout this tournament, and I've kind of been developing this over the last 6 months, my anti-alter ego, I'm calling the kid from Brixham, right? Brixham, the small town that I used to live in down on the south coast. And the kid from Brixham is a scared little boy that's very insecure and has no idea what to do with his life. He was thrust into the world and given a disability out of his own control, and so he's different from the other kids. He walks funny, he has to use a wheelchair, he's ostracized for that, he doesn't fit in. He's the boy who couldn't join in with traditional PE classes because the teachers didn't know what to do with him. He's the boy that struggled with self-esteem issues. He's the boy that then found a sport that he enjoyed because it created a community around him of other people with disabilities that made him feel accepted. And he's the boy who, and I remember this specific scenario, and this is one that I come back to when I want to sort of tap into my anti-alter ego, which is he's a 12-year-old boy that was crying his eyes out in the disabled toilet at Worcester University Arena when he was given the opportunity to play in an under-15s game, the one game that his dad came to come and watch, and he didn't play, right? And that feeling that, my relationship with my dad isn't great, and he just came to watch this one game, and I didn't even see the floor. I just sat on the bench, and I remember going to the toilet with my mum and just bawling my eyes out, feeling so vulnerable and insecure and confused and lost, right? And I remember that. I remember how painful that was. And so that's this weak, vulnerable, insecure part of myself that is so true and real, and he's in me, and he is the guy that feels anxiety. He's the guy that doesn't feel good enough. He's the guy that possesses me when I feel a state of negative emotion or worry or fear. But this tournament, Jacob, I turned that around, and I remember writing one WhatsApp message to my mentor on the first evening of the tournament and going, whatever happens tomorrow and whatever I do onwards in my sporting career before I retire, everything I do is going to be for that little kid from Brixham who didn't feel good enough. And then every time my name was called up from the bench, and I remember it specifically when I had to shoot free throws in the third game, I thought about my 12-year-old self crying his eyes out in the toilet. And I thought how proud he'd be to see where I am and what I'm doing. And when you have that mentality that you're doing it for that vulnerable side of yourself, you're doing it out of compassion, then all the bullshit of how many points you've scored or what other people are saying to you, what trash talk they're using, or how the score of the game is, or how efficiently you're shooting, all of that kind of squashes into nothingness. And you just smile at what's around you, at how mental it is that you got there. Because really, Jacob, I'm still that little kid from Brixham. I've just done thousands of hours of training, and I've read a bunch of books, and I've got some qualifications, and I've yapped on a podcast for hundreds of hours, but I'm still him. He's still in there. And so this idea of doing it for this weaker and inverted commas part of yourself, I really like, because I think rather than it being a toxic fuel source like the anger and the emotional intensity of like Kobe Bryant's Black Mamba, it's doing it out of love for who you really are. And it's a fuel source that I think can last a lifetime. And most importantly, which is one final point I'll say before I open the floor for you to comment, is that seeing it as the kid from Brixham keeps me grounded and keeps me humble. Like, it was literally one thing that I said when I sent, I think it was my mum, a picture of like me in the All-Star 5, and there was other guy in the All-Star 5 who was like a Paralympic gold medalist in 2016. And I just put, how is the kid from Brixham, in a photo next to the Paralympic gold medalist? You know, it's like that, putting it in that perspective. It's humbling, it's powerful, it's compassionate, and it's not toxic. So that's my sports psychology theory. And I haven't seen, there might be some information out there on this kind of thing, but it's a new thought for me.
It's one of my favourite theories that you've presented. I think it's very fundamental for everyone that needs to perform. The alter ego, right? The alter ego reminded me of David Goggins' version of Goggins that he gets into.
Yeah, exact same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like how you described how to achieve this, Mr. Miyagi. This guy that does it for himself and not others. Because really the alter ego, I think, is he's just trying to beat others and trying to be dominant over them so that they're submissive from him. And your really good theory the other week about how the problem with being either dominant or submissive is they're both negative outcomes, I think is quite a very interesting and important message. And so the solution then is what you just discovered, is doing it for yourself, beating your younger self. Because even if you take the side of things of, okay, my fuel source, it isn't being dragged, it's being driven, but then that person that's still being driven is accountable to a judge that you're never going to please. So I think the Mr. Miyagi is something we should all strive for. I mean, what a sick character. Like, to be in control and to spiritually move with the craft and be one with it.